Tesla's marketing of the Semi has been pure genius. There's been a lot of ways that Elon Musk and his team have tricked most consumers into thinking how well off the Semi truly is in their recent launch event, and also the 500-mile range test that they just conducted last month. The Semi is undoubtedly one of the most polarizing launches in the entire EV space, and although it is definitely viable, it's still difficult to understand whether or not it is cost effective to any regard, not only just for the tractor but also from a charging standpoint. In this video, I want to share my reaction and support some of the arguments that Engineering Explained brought up in his latest video covering the Tesla Semi's mathematics, because there's a lot we can learn from the pitching that Tesla has done for its latest product. But as usual, guys, before we get into it, make sure to drop me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. So to start things off, let me share my context for the analysis I'm about to conduct for the Semi and the points I'm about to raise. Tesla's launch event was extremely positive for a lot of investors and community enthusiasts because it showed us that the battery electric space is indeed capable of electrifying the semi-truck market. But there were a lot of important details that were left out from the launch event, which obviously is really disappointing for a product that was delayed by over 3 years. There's obviously massive expectations from the most valuable automaker in the world. As a result, any sort of kinks in the short term should be addressed appropriately, because obviously it's not like we want to spread misinformation about the viability of a technology, because not only is it going to affect investing, it's also going to affect the world of actual adoption and customers that want to purchase these vehicles. And that's obviously because of the fact that we don't actually know the weight of the Tesla Semi on empty. This is something that's critical for most customers to purchase the vehicle for. And although yes, most Class A trucks do not run a full load, the weight goes more than just the amount of payload you can carry. Because of the massive batteries in the Semi, the weight is going to decide how much it's going to take to replace the entire battery pack and how much wear and tear that actually goes onto the drivetrain of the vehicle and the tires. Obviously, if the vehicle is extremely heavy, not only is it going to damage typical roads that it's going to be driving on, but the maintenance cost is going to go up, along with the fact that you cannot haul more load if you need it to. And potentially even more importantly, from a charging standpoint, the bigger the battery you have, the longer it takes to charge it, and the more energy is going to be required for a fast charge. That wouldn't be a problem in a 100 kilowatt hour Tesla Model S, but in an estimated 1000 kilowatt hour Tesla Semi, that is going to be a pretty big concern for not only investors, but also those that build and manage the electric grid. Not only is megawatt charging pretty much non-existent in a commercial fashion across the United States, but EV battery costs are actually expected to go up over the next few years, despite more production coming online. That is all due to rising material costs, which are now actually starting to take over the decline and improvement in economies of scale. And the really interesting thing is that we don't know the cost of the Tesla Semi. We don't know what PepsiCo has been paying for it, which we know did include incentives of around $190,000. And for those that are still thinking the Tesla Semi is going to cost $180 to $200K, which is what Elon Musk touted back in 2017, the latest figures of electric vehicle battery costs might beg to differ. Right now, for example, it costs around $132 per kilowatt hour as of November of 2021 to get a battery pack for electric vehicles. And if you do the math on that, for around a 1 megawatt hour battery pack, the cost of that single system is going to put you around $132,000. That is typically the cost of a diesel Class A truck on the market today, and that is a brand new one, not even a used one. So if you still think the vehicle is going to retail at $180,000, I have a bridge to sell you. And as is pretty well known in the entire industry, the battery pack of an electric vehicle accounts for anywhere between 30 to 50% of the total cost of the vehicle. And that is not the manufacturing cost, that is just the cost of goods sold. And so for the Tesla Semi, if we assume a very conservative 50% total vehicle cost, that puts the total potential cost of the tractor at $260,000. So either Tesla is selling these vehicles at an insanely negative gross margin, or they're only going to sell these vehicles if they're qualified for a massive $200K incentive from the government. In either case, I think this is a good truck to get on the road. It's just that we need to be clear about the costs and the limitations of the technology. And I think no one other than Jason Fenske from Engineering Explained has done a better job of laying the math straight. You see, based on Jason's findings, the 500-mile test that Tesla conducted was actually done at a speed much lower than most semi-trucks actually run. Not only that, but a lot of regenerative braking was used throughout the entire test because the altitude increased significantly, but then also dropped just as much as it increased, which meant that at the end of the day, the Tesla Semi started and ended at the same altitude. And that obviously makes sense because that's what's going to allow them to reach their full range because they're able to leverage regenerative braking. But as we know, most trucking routes don't necessarily end at the same altitude, especially if you're out in the West, which is where a lot of trucking is particularly needed because of the long distances. It also turned out that the Semi was running around 50 to 60 miles per hour at its peak during the entire run and sitting only in the right lane. That isn't necessarily a bad thing, it just means that the driver was not necessarily pushing it or hauling a big load. This is obviously a sign that they're trying to maximize the amount of range, which is something most drivers that purchase these kinds of trucks are not necessarily going to do, which obviously can be a concern for the real world. And obviously, as you can see right in the middle of this chart, it's pretty clear that when the truck started to climb from around 250 feet to 4,136 feet, that the battery state of charge collapsed at an exponential pace. This is something I think people are not realizing, which is the fact that if you were to actually drive the Semi up a hill and leave it there for a delivery or a pickup, you would actually lose a significant amount of range. Now, this isn't necessarily a problem with Tesla's product. This is just a drawback of battery electric technology itself. In a battery pack, the power rating and capacity are interlinked, which means that if you need to add more range, you always need to add more packs. And so at some point, the higher range is going to actually cost you more range because of the weight of packs you're carrying. And that is obviously pretty easily amplified in the reliability concerns that we've been facing with the Semi so far, and the fact that if you go up a hill, you lose a lot of range really fast. Now, this is obviously a problem across the entire value chain of lithium battery technology. At different temperatures, you lose a lot of effectiveness for a battery cell. Even though in a laboratory the end-to-end efficiency can be around 90%, when you're actually using lower duty cycles and using different temperature ranges with different loads, the state of charge and degradation amplifies within a cell. At the very first moment that you power on a battery and charge it to 100% and drain it to 0%, you're losing almost 0.25% of its overall capacity. Now imagine how that'll get amplified in a 1,000 kilowatt hour battery on a semi-truck that is hauling loads in 100-degree weather in Arizona. And Jason estimates that because of that aforementioned limitation with lithium battery cells, at 70 miles per hour on a full load, the actual range of the Semi with the current battery estimated at 850 kilowatt hours would actually only be around 360 miles. That is obviously okay if you're just operating drayage routes within a couple of cities that are pretty close to each other, but for that longer haul market, which is something the Tesla Semi is trying to target with its 500-mile range, it will not make too much sense. Because at least from my experience here in New York City, most trucks on the road do run north of 65 to 70 miles an hour. But I'm sure the question that you guys are asking me right now is, what exactly is my end game with this video? What am I trying to accomplish by stating the drawbacks and some of the kinks with the Tesla Semi? Well, I don't like deceptive marketing, and neither do I like misleading investors and prospective customers, which is why I would really appreciate if the Tesla Semi's full weight and actual battery capacity, price, and cost would be unveiled by Tesla. It's really easy to make a lot of assumptions when there's so much uncertainty and unclarity about a product from one of the world's most valuable automakers. If they truly want to disrupt this space with their battery technology, they need to be more clear, because it's pretty clear that right now, because they're trying to hide all this data, that it is not data that they're too proud of. And because of the already very controversial design of the Tesla Semi and the lack of a sleeper cab in such a big chassis, there's already too much concern around this vehicle, and we simply need more clarity, which is going to help drive the overall industry forward. I do think the Semi is a fantastic product. There's not a lot of companies that are developing battery electric Class 8 semi-trucks out there. It's just that at this point, the industry needs more honesty and visibility about the practicality of such vehicles, given their insane disruption in a very traditional space. Diesel and natural gas semi-truck owners love their trucks. It's very difficult to switch to an electric powertrain in a business-oriented industry, and that is why I believe the way that Tesla should be operating with the Semi is focusing on the 300-mile range version. At that mile range, it would actually make sense for short haul and medium haul applications within cities. At that range, the vehicle would actually be more cost effective because the battery pack would not need to be that heavy and that big of a percentage of the overall cost of goods sold. That would not only make the price of the Tesla Semi to a customer cheaper, but it would make it easier to maintain, and it would potentially save some space within the cab itself and also reduce wear and tear. For that 500-mile range and higher market, there's already solutions out there being developed from companies like Toyota and Nikola Motors, which are primarily hydrogen fuel cell driven. Hydrogen provides much better cost and energy effectiveness at higher range for longer duration applications. It provides a one-to-one replacement in many cases for the traditional gasoline and diesel operation structure, which makes it much easier for customers to switch over to these vehicles. And that is why I think the Tesla Semi's target market should indeed be the 300-mile and under range. That's where it probably makes the most sense. But as usual, guys, that is just my take on the situation. So let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below.